Hamas leaders are considering a new Middle East ceasefire proposal from Israel. The deal includes a 40-day truce in return for the release of some hostages. It would also allow for displaced families to return to northern Gaza. It's reported to involve new wording on restoring calm to Gaza that's designed to satisfy Hamas's demand for a permanent ceasefire. A source close to the talks told the BBC the new proposal from Israel is significantly different from previous offers. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken called this deal extraordinarily generous. That view echoed by the UK's Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron.
All the pressure in the world and all the eyes of the world should be on them today, saying take that deal. It will bring about this stop in the fighting that we all want to see so badly.
According to Israel, 133 hostages are still being held by Hamas in Gaza. At least 30 of them are presumed dead. Mediators from Egypt, Qatar and the US have been attempting for weeks to broker a deal to bring another pause in the fighting. Now, one source has told the BBC they are cautiously optimistic about the prospects of this deal being accepted. In a development, though, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that Israel will carry out an offensive against Hamas in Rafah, regardless of whether or not a ceasefire deal has been reached. Well, as those negotiations take place, fighting continues in Gaza. We've seen smoke rising over the centre of the Strip earlier today as airstrikes hit the territory. The Health Ministry said there had been a further 47 deaths in the last day. It says more than 34,500 people have died since the conflict began almost 7 months ago, following the Hamas attack on Israel on October the 7th. Our Middle East correspondent Yolanda is in Jerusalem.
This Hamas delegation that was in Cairo meeting Egyptian and Qatari mediators left late yesterday, and we understand that they're now in consultations with the top Hamas leadership. Arab media suggesting that they will get back to the mediators by the end of tomorrow with their response to the latest deal that's on the table. Now, feeding into all of that, we do have these new comments by the Israeli Prime Minister. On the one hand, he's reiterating what he's said now for many weeks, that Israel is still determined to go into Rafah in the very south of the Gaza Strip to eliminate Hamas battalions there, that they'll do that with or without a new hostage deal. But obviously the timing here is of the essence. This is a very sensitive moment, and there are fears that anything could scupper a new deal at this point.
We're just seeing pictures there of Benjamin Netanyahu. The War Cabinet continues to meet, of course. How much domestic disagreement is there, and disagreement within the Cabinet about what should happen with Rafah?
I mean, within the overall cabinet of the coalition government led by Mr. Netanyahu, you do have some really deep divisions now. And those on the far right have really been saying that Israel needs to prioritize going into Rafah in order to win this war. One far right minister, Bezalel Smotrich, said the government had no right to exist if it didn't prioritize that. And then in response, we had Benny Gantz, who's a member of the War Cabinet, is more of a centrist, coming back saying that the government had no right to exist if it blocked a hostage deal. So you can see there is that dynamic going on. The latest comments by Mr. Netanyahu do appear to put him more on the side of his far-right ministers, but he's also going to be under a lot more international pressure in the coming hours, as we're expecting the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken to come to meet Israeli leaders. The US and others have really been pushing for a new deal at this point that would bring home Israeli hostages and in exchange have a sort of 6-week ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. And we've had various Western leaders coming out saying that this is something that is positive. Arab ministers supporting that as well.
Yolanda, we've already heard from Mr. Blinken, who said that the US has not yet seen a plan that gives us confidence that civilians can be effectively protected in Rafah. How would you judge the US influence on Benjamin Netanyahu at the moment and their leverage?
Well, the US position is very much that really because of the number of people in Rafah down along the Egyptian border that have been displaced by the fighting, something like 1.4 million people crammed into a very small area. That means that no ground offensive can really take place effectively there. It's going to be impossible to move that many people in a way that Israel can go in with the force that it wants to go after what it says are 4 Hamas battalions that are still based in that city. It's the one part of the Gaza Strip where there has not been a full ground offensive up to now. But it's really not clear just how much leverage the US has over Israel. Of course, we know that on the international stage, it consistently shields Israel, that it is a major donor, has just recently approved billions more dollars in military aid for Israel. But Israel has consistently made clear that when it comes to issues of its own security, it will very much take advice from the Americans. We know that there have meetings being taken place to try to discuss alternatives to a full ground invasion of Rafah with Israeli and US officials. But in the end, Israel says it makes its own decisions.
Yolande Nel there.